Thank you, Senator Daines. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bernhardt, following on that same theme, I'm disappointed in the firefighting budget as it relates to the Department of Interior's part of that program. So I'm going to definitely be sending you a letter on that today. But we worked very hard in a bipartisan fashion to end fire borrowing. And so we want to make sure that the President's FY 2020 budget proposal, which is basically reverses course on that, or at least doesn't move us forward as it relates to the budget, that you're going to be an advocate of moving forward on the principles that we've passed here in Congress to end fire borrowing and make huge investments in the types of fuel reduction and investment we need to see.
Well, I really appreciate that question. Unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to meet yet, and and visit. And I know we have one meeting scheduled, and I'd love to talk to you about that issue, because from my perspective, we're in a little different place, at least with Interior's budget and fire, that we actually feel like we got the additional $300 million. So I'd love to have the discussion with you, understand it, and happy to work with you on the issue. We all have a commitment to make sure that we're actively addressing those issues in the proper way. So I'd be happy to visit with you about it.
Okay, so do you support what we did in ending fire borrowing and putting resources towards fuel reduction?
I absolutely support putting resources towards fuel reduction.
And
I have, and borrowing.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Mr. Bernhardt, I wanted to talk to you about the Arctic Wildlife, the National Wildlife Refuge, and obviously you have an important role here to play. I want to ask about specifically the coastal plain of the refuge is to believe it's one of the greatest concentration of polar bear dens across the Alaskan Arctic coastline, and the southern Beaufort polar bear population would be one of the most impacted by drilling. I'm concerned that you're rushing to move forward on this. To drill in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. So my questions are, do you believe the Endangered Species Act and ANILCA, the Alaska National Interest Land Conservation Act, and the National Wildlife Refuge System Act apply to the National Arctic Wildlife Refuge? Do those laws apply to the Arctic Wildlife Refuge?
I wasn't, certainly the Endangered Species Act does. And the Marine Mammal Protection Act does, and both of those are acts that really protect polar bears, and those are the primary acts that we look to when addressing polar bear issues. And they both would apply to any activities that happened in the
ESA?
Area. What's that?
And the ESA?
Yeah, absolutely, the ESA.
Okay. A memo was written by Dr. Patrick Lemons, Chief of Marine Mammal Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Office in Alaska, detailing numerous areas where the Interior Department does not have enough information about polar bears to determine whether or not the Arctic Wildlife Refuge drilling would harm or kill polar bears or destroy designated critical habitat. Are you aware of this memo?
I'm generally aware of the memo.
Okay. Do you believe in the analysis? The Interior Department scientists apparently shared this memo because they believe the science and some of that information might be being suppressed. So do you believe in the analysis conducted by the department scientists and incorporated into that EIS? If you don't know the answer, you can give me an answer later, but I want to know whether you believe in the science that was part of that.
So when we look at ANWR, and we spent a lot of time on this, first off, there's a ton of studies that were done in the 80s, but more recently, the Fish and Wildlife Service completed a comprehensive conservation plan for ANWR in 2015, which really, I think, had over 2,500 pages of documents, 57 pages of literature citations. And then in 2018, I asked the U.S. Geological Survey to create a summary of anything that was updated to that. So I feel very confident that our entire record includes everything possible for ANWR in terms of things that are already available. I think the memo that you're speaking to goes to studies that
Can you share that information you were just, can you share with us that information, correspondence or documents, so that we can see that too?
I'll bring it to our meeting and we can talk through it, yeah, of course.
Thank you. I think you know, my concerns here are that I think we're rushing. Now, we had a debate. Obviously, my viewpoint failed, but I didn't think that drilling was consistent with the other goals of a wildlife refuge. I definitely disagreed on that point. So as a steward of our lands, I hope that you're going to use these oversight responsibilities as it relates to managing the wildlife refuge and not ignoring those responsibilities as you look to moving forward. So I'm sure much of this is going to end up in a big legal dispute, but I think for you to help us by being transparent on how you're meeting the goals of those other relevant acts as it relates to managing a wildlife refuge will be very important for people in the United States. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell.